Welcome, everybody, again to another wonderful episode of Redemption Thursdays with Rabbi Pinchas Winston of Tellstone, Israel. We're into our second month of war. We were attacked by Hamas, and we're fighting them tooth and nail, and we're losing lots of people, lots of soldiers, God forbid. But we know that this is a month of miracles, and we're praying to God that we can wipe this evil out of our country and out of the world. It's also the last night of Hannukah, which is also represents a time that is very special for us as well, that Rabbi will explain. I just want to point out to you that Rabbi Winston has a second website. We have discussed this before, but I just want to make sure people are aware. His original website, 36.org, is very interesting and wonderful, and has in-depth information on all kinds of topics, Jewish and Parsha, that's Torah portion of the week, and Kabbalistic things, and all kinds of webinars about end of days and things. His new website, which he'll maybe, if he wants to discuss, he can talk a little bit more about it, is called sharnunproductions.org. And from what I can tell, it's a little bit more in depth. It kind of takes the other website and goes much more in depth. For instance, his Parsha sheet, weekly Torah sheet called Perceptions, as a weekly essay on the current Torah portion, and it goes into much more depth. There are Kabbalistic teachings of Rabbi Shlomo Eliashev, which is the Leshem, and the Antel, which are famous Kabbalists. And of course, there's an end of days timeline explained, how it affects us, how the first days of creation, all the days of creation affect every single millennia that we lived in, the 6 years that we've been existing, and how they affect all these things affect us today. So, Rabbi, maybe we'll get to that another time, but I just want to point to people out to the fact that you have these beautiful websites and they should visit. And also, go ahead. And so, without further ado, Rabbi, please go on with your shiur on Hannukah.
Thank you. Okay, this is Zos Hannukah for those of us living in Israel. This time, the time zone, I guess even for people in England at this point in time as well. The last night of Hannukah, others are still back on the seventh day of Hannukah. This is the 36th candle, which means that that's the number that corresponds to the organuz, hidden life creation, which is what we're trying to get to. That's what life is all about. That's what's missing from the world. All the bad that takes place in history is because this light's missing. And the Jewish people are called an Or Lagoyim, led into nations, because it's our job to draw it down into the world. And if we don't do it, nobody else will. It's not going to happen automatically. And instead, the world goes lacking, and you have these historic trends where everything goes south, and everything becomes confused, and the moral compass gets broken, and everything becomes very, very difficult to live through, especially if you're somebody with seichel and understands what the world should look like and how we're supposed to live. Normally, Shabbos comes a little bit later in the year, and as a result of that, the parsha that usually is the parsha of Shabbos itself is Parshas Miketz. But this year, because Hannukah was a little bit earlier, we're going to have a leap year this year, God willing, to make up for the lack of time. And as a result of that, Parshat Vayeshev was last Shabbos, which was Hannukah, and Miketz will be after Hannukah. But they're always around this time of year, close to Hannukah time, and Miketz is very much connected to Hannukah in many different ways. The story of Yosef and his brothers, we'll talk about that in a second, but it's unusual that because of the way that the week is laid out. So if you're somebody who reads the Parsha one aliyah every day, so therefore you start on Sunday, Yom Rishon, and you start with one aliyah, and then you read another aliyah, and hopefully by Shabbos is the seventh aliyah. So Friday, of course, is the sixth aliyah, and which happens to be this year happens to be the eighth day of Hannukah, which is a somewhat of Ashkacha Pratis, a little bit of Ashkacha Pratis, divine providence, because in this aliyah, literally the sixth aliyah, it says this is what happened. Basically, was that the brothers went back home and they told Yaakov about the whole situation, that Yosef the viceroy had accused them of being spies, and they could not come back for any more food if they did not bring Binyamin with them. And now they're back. Now, after the famine got worse, so Yaakov was forced to send Binyamin down with instructions about how to deal with the situation. They found the money in their bags, and they got nervous because how could that possibly happen? That God was setting them up from some type of big fall. So now they're back, standing before Yosef, and it says, the pasuk says, "B'yar Yosef itam es Binyamin right? So he saw Binyamin with them. V'yomer lasher al Beiso. He spoke to the one who was over his house, which was Menashe, his son, but they didn't know that. Right? Hava es anashim abaisa, like to bring these people to my house, to the house, right? Utvach tavach v'hachein, which literally means and slaughter and prepare. Ki iti yochlu hanashim b'tzaharayim, because I'm going to eat with these people in the afternoon. Which is lots of questions here, because that alone is strange, because Egyptians didn't eat with Jews, so that was the first clue that he wasn't a normal Egyptian. But aside from the fact that it says that, right? So the Gemara actually darshans out the devil. Tavach means the slaughter. Tevach is a butcher, right? So to slaughter the animal, because Yosef knew that they wouldn't trust the meat unless they saw the shechita themselves, and the hachein, the Gemara says, means remove the gid anashya from Parshas V'yishlach, when the angel touches Yaakov's leg, and from that point onward, we don't eat the gid anashya, which is the sciatic nerve in the hind leg of the cow, and you can sell it, but you can't eat it. It has to be removed. It's not so easy to do, which is one of the reasons why we don't have sirloin steaks very often, because that's where it is, and it's very hard to remove. So, that's the gid anashya. But I believe it's Pirkei de Rabbi Eliezer points out that the words utvach v'tavach have a total gematria of 44, an allusion to the 36 candles of Hannukah plus the 8 shemashim, because every night you don't have to, but we do, light not only a candle, but you also light the shamash too, so that you don't just automatically benefit from use it to light the other candles, but also so you shouldn't benefit from the light of the Ner Hannukah, because as we say in the tefillah after Haneres Halalu, that it's only to look at them, to see them, not to get any real benefit from them, not to read by them and to use them for any particular purpose until the mitzvah is over. So that makes 44 candles, and the words tavach allude to that, and v'hachein actually together with. Excuse me, I just a little bit cold, so I'll be doing that probably a lot tonight. So the last letters of the word v'hachein, those are 4 letters, vav hey chof nun, together with the ches of the word v'tavach, the word before it, are the 5 letters of Hannukah. So right there in this verse, on the 8th day of Hannukah, which is the 44th candle if you include the shemashim, so you actually have an allusion with in the parsha itself to that, which of course this is long before there was any Hannukah holiday to celebrate in the first place. So it's a nice little piece of Hashgacha Pratis, divine providence, because that's what it's all about. Anyhow, the whole story is about divine providence. The whole story is about and the brothers themselves acknowledge this by saying God's doing this to us. It's not just the viceroy, it's not just the Egyptians in general. With this whole thing with the money back in our knapsacks that shouldn't be there, and the bizarre thing being called spies and all that, it's all Hashgacha Pratis tied to the sale of Yosef some 22 years earlier. So this is what everything comes down to. Hashgacha Pratis, how much you see, how much you believe in it, how much it's a part of your life. Really a part of your consciousness. That's really the point. But the main point from this idea, now back to the main idea, which I'd like to discuss this evening, B'ezras Hashem, is that obviously dreams play a major role in the story of Yosef and his brothers, but really in the development of Mashiach. The whole messianic process is so much dependent upon dreams. Yaakov, first of all, has his dream, and his dream is about the ladder, and the ladder represents the exiles the Jewish people will go through, which, of course, every exile has a redemption. So therefore, there was also an allusion to the redemptions that will come at the end of the Babylonian exile, the Median exile, and the Greek exile, eventually the Roman exile. Now we're just waiting now for the Ishmaelite exile. It's not really one of the 4 exiles, but it's a tail end of the previous, the 4th one. And so therefore, that dream itself, like why not just? I mean, the truth is, a prophecy was a large part through dreams, but the emphasis is on the fact that it was a dream by Yaakov Avinu, and then of course Yosef, his whole story has to do with the dreams. It starts off with Yosef talking about how he's going to be a leader one day, or he's actually preparing himself. Rashi points out he's curling his hair. He's treating himself like royalty, And they see this, and they think he's dangerous for the future of the Jewish people. Therefore, they hate him. They're not thinking about getting rid of him yet, because he may have delusions of grandeur, but that doesn't mean he's going to be able to fulfill them. Doesn't mean he's going to have to do anything about that. And then he starts having dreams about it, right? And that's already a different story, because dreams are serious stuff, especially in those days. Dreams were more like prophecy than today, where it's just a function of the brain taking the garbage out every night, because we have so much going on inside our heads, we can't process all of it. But in those days, dreams were more like prophecy. So when he has these dreams, but then he interprets the dream that he's going to be a king one day, which means that they only hate him because now it's only because it's a function of the fact that he has these ideas, he has these plans, he has this ego, seemingly. He has this thing where he wants to lead the nation. Who says? You're one of the youngest of all this, even though Yaakov himself gave you a special coat, which some say is like a royalty, also for royalty, like a what do you call it, what those kings wear, a royalty cloak, whatever it's like that. The son is Pasim, and so again, he's not necessarily a threat, because Yaakov's going to die at some point in time, and we can just ignore you, so we can go about our business, we can make our own leaders. You don't have you can't be king if you don't have a kingdom. And if none of us want to be ruled by Yosef, he can be king all he wants. He's not going to have any kingdom, and therefore he's nothing. At that point, they only hate him. That's what the Torah says. They hate him. Excuse me. So the next time he has a dream, his father overhears it. And his father, he reprimands him, because he shouldn't be talking about his dreams out in the open in front of his brothers, especially when he knows how much they don't like him, how antagonistic it's going to sound and be. So therefore, his father says you shouldn't be doing that. Even though his father, Shomer Davar, he understands it's real. And we know that because even without hearing from Yosef his interpretation, Yaakov himself interprets the dream this way. What? Your mother and I will go down and bow down before you? Well, who said that's what it's talking about? But Yaakov himself saw that. And because Yaakov saw that, that was important to the brothers. The brothers therefore decided that maybe there's some reality to this dream, and Yosef may be slated to become king one day, and that can't be possible. So therefore, we now have to get rid of him. So that's where the Torah goes from hatred at first, and then jealousy next, because Yaakov's interpretation of the dream. Now, why? Because the Gemara says, interesting enough, that the dream goes after the interpretation. It goes after the interpretation. How you interpret the dream will determine what the dream is going to be in reality, which is a very fascinating concept. We'll see why in a second, God willing. But when Yosef interpreted the dream, of course, he's going to interpret it favorably. I don't know if I mentioned this example in the previous week or at some other point in time, but the Gemara brings an example of this idea, how true, how stark this idea is, because there was a Bar Hedya or Bar Hadai, I'm not exactly sure how to pronounce his name, but he was a dream interpreter in the time of Rava and Abai. Rava and Abai were Amoraim, living the time of the Gemara, when it was being, that stage of history between the time of the Mishnah and Gemara, and they both had identical dreams. They had the exact same dream, and they both went to Bar Hadaya to have their dreams interpreted, and Abaya paid for his interpretation, and Rava didn't. So therefore, Bar Hadaya interpreted everything for Abaya in a very positive light, and it all came true, exactly as he said. But for Rava, who didn't pay for it, he interpreted everything in a negative light, and that all came true, including losing his wife as a result of it. So Bar Hadai, he set it all up by interpreting it this way, because it goes after the mouth. So then what does Yosef mean when he says to the wine steward and to the baker in prison at the end of Parshas Vayeshev, when he says to him, dreams, they belong to God, don't they? Isn't God the one who interprets it? Tell me your dreams. It's going to be God who's going to interpret them. Well, I don't know. I mean, don't you say what it's going to be, and that's what it becomes? Same thing by Parro. This week's Parsha, Parro has a dream. He takes it to his Chaitumim and his advisors and everybody else. looking for some kind of interpretation that resonates with him, and none of them do. And then, for some bizarre reason, the wine steward, coughs up the fact that he was in prison not too long ago. I mean, who even does that? That's like crazy. Even if he knew about Yosef, so what? So Parro can't get an interpretation. But who's going to know about Yosef? Who's going to know that Yosef does this kind of a thing? And okay, maybe a little bit of a risk, but still, it's a much bigger risk to recall his sin, as he says, and to talk about this Ish Ivri, this Nar, this young boy who is able to interpret dreams, and Parro schleps him to jail right away. They shave him, dress him, prepare him to stand before the king, and he does. And Parro says, I hear that you're able to interpret dreams. And Yosef says, no, it's not me, it's God who interprets dreams. I'm just the messenger. I'm just the one that God may speak through, but as God interprets the dream. So what does the Gemara mean if that it goes after the peh, it goes after the mouth? Does Yosef need God in the picture? You listen to the dream and you interpret it the way you think you want to. So in a sense, if it goes after the mouth, then really it's Yosef who set up the freedom of the wine steward and caused the death of the baker. Now, why did he do that? And how did he do that? And not just that, but if it goes after the mouth, then we can even say that Yosef's interpretation of the dreams of Parro caused the famine. The plenty first, and then the famine, because that was his interpretation. So what does that mean? So the truth is, it's actually very interesting because the whole, if you go into this whole area of quantum mechanics, quantum physics, there's a very deep idea that science is coming to understand, trying to understand, at least on a subatomic level. We're not so sure in terms of the larger level, the bigger level, how things, because there's some inconsistencies, and it's difficult to be able to see how this plays out in everyday life on our level of reality. But at least on a subatomic level, there is a concept that reality is really a function of probability until somebody observes it and it's measured. Someone has to observe it and then measure, or measure. I mean, the observation itself is a measurement, or the measurement itself is the observation. But until it's decided what that reality is going to be, there's probability, there's possibilities, right? Now, in every moment, there are, probability means that certain things are more probable than others. So, for example, if you get, we're using a real life everyday example on a larger scale, but it's easier to understand it this way. So, for example, if you get a bill in the mail that happens to be a lot more than you have money to pay for it right now, and you're thinking to yourself, I can't go to the bank because I'm already overdrawn, and I can't use my credit card because it's already maxed out. I can't go to my parents because I did that last month. I just don't know where to turn. And the bill is due in 3 days or 1 week, and I don't have anywhere to get that money. So now the probability is that you're going to default on the payments. It's possible you won't. It's possible you might find more money. It's possible that someone's going to come on and help you. It's possible your parents said there's all kinds of possibilities. I mean, life is filled with stories, and there are books on Hashgacha Pratis where incredible miracles happen at the last second. Especially Hasidic stories, you find a lot of this where somebody, owes money, and there's sort of the Gemara like this actually. I think his name is Ben Gurion, not Ben Gurion. Is it Ben Gurion? I think so. No, yeah, anyhow, what happens? He's a wealthy man, and the time but is basically trying to remember the story now, but the Ali Regel, those who used to come up to the Beis Hamikdash in the holidays, they would have to travel from far distances, sometimes from across the land, sometimes even from Bavel. They came from outside the country itself as well. So they needed food and water and things like that. And there was a drought and there was no water. So what happened was that this person, what's his name? He borrowed money to buy supplies and water for the Oli Regel. Those are coming up for the holiday, and he had a deadline. Or he borrowed the water. He actually borrowed the water, No, I remember this right myself. He boiled the water, and he was supposed to repay it by a certain time. If not, then the money, his money was supposed to pay for whatever the water was, right? Either he had replaced the water. It's a while since I saw the story. He had replaced the cisterns where the water was, so they could use the water. Was used up for those who came up on the holiday, and he had to replace it by a certain time, or he had to pay for the water that he took, which is a lot of money. And the day came closer. And the Gentile that lent him the money in the first place came to him on the day of the debt was supposed to be paid, and he said, "No, right? It's like the day of, pay up, give me the money." He said, "No, I still have a whole day." He said, "Okay, right?" And he went to the mikvah. He did his own thing, and later that day he came out of the mikvah, and the guy who lent him the money was all happy because he thinks he did all this money now. He says, "No, the time's almost up. Pay." He said, "No, I still have more time." And it says he went to the base of Mikdash, the temple, and he davened to Kosh Baruch Hu that a miracle should happen for him. They should be able to pay the money, and and it was after Pesach already, because that's when they came up for that holiday. And after Pesach is not the rainy season, so it's not supposed to rain. It was already drought from before that, so now it's not going to rain after Pesach. And he davened, and what happened is that it's just as the sun was setting, just at that last moment in the day. I mean, this is an impossible story. The last moment of the day, all of a sudden, the clouds came together. It rained and it poured. And it filled the cisterns, and he was able to give back the water he took, and not have to pay any money. And the Gentile said to him, "I know that God has done a miracle for you, but the truth is, it happened after the time. The sun had already set. It was already the next day. So technically speaking, even though you give me back the water, you owe me the money. That's what I want. I want the money." He went to the base of Mikdash. He davened to Kodesh Baruch Hu for another miracle, and the Kodesh Baruch Hu opened the clouds up so that he could see that the sun had not yet set. It actually had set, but Kodesh Baruch Hu reversed it a bit, made it still the same day. Why a miracle like that? But that's an example. It's an example of a story, and that's in the Gemara. So people might say, "Oh yeah, that's a Gemara. Gemara's lots of stories like that," but who knows exactly if that's what this is a story exactly the way it happened. But even today, there's so many people with stories like this where you have an 11th hour salvation. Every moment has potential for something else. Just because you don't know what it is, right? I know a person who was in a terrible financial situation, and he was about to panic and everything. And he said to himself, he said, "You know something? This is an opportunity. God, you are master of the world. You run the world. You give, you take. It's all up to you." Like Eos says, and therefore I am going to trust that somehow between now and the time I need to take care of this financial situation, you're going to provide some type of solution that I have not thought about. Because just because I haven't thought about it until now, it doesn't mean that you haven't thought about it until now. So you might already know what it is. I just know what it is, and you're just going to reveal it to me. And it happened exactly like that. And if you look at the moment, the probability was that it wouldn't happen. There's so many stories. I mean, there's so many examples where they come and they take away the furniture, they take away the car, take away this, take away that, because people can't pay their debts, and people can't pay their bills, and the electricity is cut off, and the water is cut off. I mean, that's what normally happens in this world. In a situation like that, when a miracle happens, that's the rarity. That's the unusual thing. There's lots of stories like that, but it's already built into the moment. It's already built into the moment. So according to what we're saying, according to quantum mechanics, according to what the Gemara says about dreams, and by the way, prophecies worked in a similar way as well, because God did, except for Moshe Rabbeinu, as we see in Parshas Balosacha, at the end there, where God's talking to Miriam and Aaron about their Lashon Hara about Moshe Rabbeinu. So there God says, when every other prophet except for Moshe, I come to them and I speak to them in a riddle. What do you mean a riddle? This is a prophecy about the future of the Jewish people, what they need to know to do to save themselves from destruction, or just good stuff. But what do you mean a riddle? Well, I talk to the prophet to receive this prophecy and then interpret it according to his perception. So every prophet, different prophets could get the exact same prophecy, but they're going to interpret it differently based upon their mabat, their perspective, the way they look at the world. But that's okay, because that's what God intended. That's why God gave the prophecy to the specific prophet, but it was his interpretation that was koveya, that fixed and established the reality of that particular prophecy, just like the dream. That the saying of the dream, the interpretation of the dream was what it had different possibilities. Maybe another person would have, interpreted differently based upon where they're coming from. That's what Yosef said. That's what Yosef saw, right? So the question is, why did Yosef, God knew that, because God's above time. So as far as he's concerned, whatever you're going to say, you've already said, and therefore he can arrange it that the right person gets the right prophecy at the right time, with the right dream at the right time, to have the specific interpretation that God wants it to have. But the person is the one who's establishing the reality through their own words. The question is it a game? What do we gain from all this? What's the point of it? How do we understand this? So the Leshem says a remarkable thing, as he always does. Just about everything he says is remarkable. But he says, Ein davar omed bifnei bitachon. Nothing stands in the way of trust in God. Now, what does that mean? If you ask the average person what it means to trust in God, they won't tell you that it means if you trust in God, you'll always get the miracle. You'll always get that fantastic, miraculous redemption. They'll tell you that sometimes you might, but you have to know that if you don't, gam tova. This too is for the good. So that's also bitachon, trusting in the process, even though you don't get the result you want, because sometimes there's a historical imperative. Sometimes there's bigger things going on. So therefore, you have to understand that when God can give you what you're asking for, he will. But if there's other things going on, you have to trust that this is the better way, even if it means you're out and it causes you some anguish and difficulty, and maybe even your life, God forbid. That's what bitachon means to most people. The Leshem says, no. Bitachon means literally that if you have the proper bitachon, then you will get that redemption. You will get that miracle. You can control the miracle by having that level of bitachon. Now, having that level of bitachon really means having it, not just faking it. Not like worrying inside and pretending to be, have bitachon on the outside. It's got to be like inside and outside. But how do we justify all this? Well, let's take a look. The Nefesh HaChaim brings down the Zohar that says that when the Jewish people were standing by Yam Suf with their back against a wall, the sea in this case, and the Egyptians were up in the hills ready to pounce, just the pillar of fire was keeping them separate from each other, right? They figured their end was imminent. They're not going to survive. It's either the Egyptians or the sea, but either way they're going to die. There's no other way out. So they complained to Moshe Rabbeinu, but Moshe Rabbeinu he's davening to Kosh Baruch Hu, and then Hashem says the most remarkable thing. He says, Mati tzakalai, what are you crying out to me for? What am I crying out to you for? That's what we do. That's what we do. That's what everyone does, but especially we Jews. Whenever we're in trouble, we were told to pray. We pray because that's what you have to do, to ask God for help. It might be a complaint. That's also prayer, but specifically a prayer to asking God. That's what we do. And God says, "What are you doing it for?" So there's different interpretations as to why God says that. Some say to do with the forces of evil because they're strong at that time. He might feed them some kedusha, but basically the Zohar says that God was telling Moshe Rabbeinu that tefillah is not going to work here. You know why? Because we're talking about a massive miracle. We're not talking about just paying a bill. We're not talking about getting fooling some people who are pursuing after you. And somehow you give them, you give them you're able to escape them, right? You slip away. We're not talking about even like what happened with Elisha and Gehazi, where they were surrounded by the army of Aram, and he opened his eyes and he saw all these angels in the hills, which by the way happens in all these wars we fight. We're talking about 3 million Jews, and according to some, a lot more Erev Rav, mixed multitude, crossing the sea, which means the sea has, we're not talking about boats, we're not talking about ships, destroyers, and things like that. We're talking about crossing the sea on dry land, which means splitting the sea. And that's a massive miracle that no prayer is going to bring about. It's just too expensive, so to speak. Excuse me. It's just not going to happen. It's not going to happen. So what are we supposed to do then? So the Zohar says that God told Moshe Rabbeinu, their bitachon will split the sea. What does that mean? It means tell them to walk into the water and to keep walking to the water until they cannot walk any further, which basically means up to the nostrils. That's when you should drown. Walk as if the sea is going to split. Keep going, and the moment that they get to a certain point, the sea will split, no crossroad. And that will do it. That's going to happen. That's what's going to cause the sea to split. Not your tefillahs. Tefillahs might help a little bit, but the bitachon itself, that's what's going to split the sea. Okay. Is that something that we can learn across the board to every situation in life, or is that just unique to the time that they're crossing the sea? So putting it all together, what we're discussing here, the whole thing, and combining, and then coming up with a Hannukah message in the end, B'ezras Hashem, that's applicable to today and all times. That imagine that in every, God is God. He's very capable. He's very talented, so to speak. He's absolutely remarkable. He can do the impossible without having to think twice about it. It's like he thinks about it, it's done. We need to plan, get people involved. It's a lot of work to be human, to do things. And the more sophisticated, the more we're involved. Technology has made it a bit easier, but there's a lot of work making the technology to make your life easier. Not by God. It's a will to think it's all possible, and being outside of time, because we don't know what the results will be. For all we know, we're going to slip up. Something's going to go wrong with that plane that we built, with that gun that we put we made, with that play that we're putting on. Something might go wrong. We can only do the best we can to try to avoid error. But at the end of the day, we're human and we're fallible. And there's divine providence also involved that might make things go wrong. We call it Murphy's Law, but truth is Murphy doesn't really exist. It's just really what God decides the world needs at that point in time. But it just seems like Murphy exists. If you believe it, then that's the way God will deal with you. So for God, it's different. He's perfect. Everything he does exactly the way it has to be, and it cannot fail. So for example, let's say God takes a situation like this where a person has a bill to pay and it's going to cost them more than they have the money to pay for it. And he builds it in 5 possibilities. 5 is the most probable, the most obvious possibility, and that is that I will default on my payment and I'm going to have to answer for that, and they might even cut off my electricity. What I'm going to do until I can get up, turn back on again. That's the most likely outcome given everything I see in the situation. But you ask a person, think about it for a second. What are the possibilities of it? What are the other scenarios that might evolve from a situation like that? Could evolve if all things being equal, everything's working at but just imagine, let's say that other things could happen. What are the other possibilities? Well, could be they made a mistake, that the bill wasn't really mine, and they're going to pull it back or reduce it, right? It could be that I can call up and ask them for an extension. They're going to say yes until I have the money. It could be that I'll be going through the house and accidentally come across money I totally forgot about. I haven't remembered it yet, but it's a possibility, and maybe that'll happen. Or it could be that at the last second, just before I got to pay the bill, someone's going to call me up or knock on my front door, like these stories talk about, and the guy's going to have exactly the amount of money or close to it that I need to pay the bill, or enough of the money that I can get by. These are all possibilities. Some more probable than others, but they're all possibilities. Now, obviously, the one that's the most obvious doesn't take any bitachon. As you get better, the more miracle you introduce into the equation, the more bitachon you have to have, because that's what God has done. God has said, so to speak, that, okay, I'm going to give this guy 5 options. But it's up to him to decide which option talks to him, which will be determined based upon his level of bitachon. In other words, your bitachon, your trust in God, will tell you what to believe, and that belief will collapse the wave function, so to speak, borrow from quantum mechanics, create the reality of that miracle. That's what's in our power. So what do we get from this? Well, the Gemara says that Kadosh Baruch Hu, schus, Magal schus oidei zakai, the chiyuv oidei chayev, right? Chov oidei chayev, right? Means that God will cause good things to happen through good people. People who try to do good, people who train themselves and build themselves to be good people and be honest people. God will plug them in situations like Benat Slachar in the Chumash, who taught the halach of inheritance. Pinchas himself, who did killed Cosby Zimri in order to save the Jewish people from the plague and all the disasters going there. There's heroes who God, Yiftach and his time. There's lots of examples of where God took a good person and plugged them in, and it happens in our lifetime too. If you make yourself into a certain type of actor in God's play, he'll plug you into that part. Likewise, Korach, he went down with his rebellion because that's who he was. He was somebody who was chayiv. He was somebody with the wrong attitude, and therefore he was used for this particular case, this incident that he shoot down and caused this bad to happen. There's lots of examples. For example, in the case of the Yemi Klat, Rashi brings down that what happens, let's say somebody kills accidentally, but there's no witnesses, because there had to be witnesses. They'd be forced to flee to an Ir Miklat, a city of refuge, because that's what happened to accidental murders in those days. And somebody who killed purposely, and there were no witnesses, and he's supposed to get the capital punishment. But they're both off the hook because no one saw what they did. But God saw, and therefore God takes care of it. So what does God do? He brings them both to the same hotel, right? In those days they had ladders, not elevators, right? But the person who killed accidentally, he's climbing the ladder while the person who killed intentionally is walking under the ladder, and the ladder breaks and collapses. And now there's all kinds of witnesses sitting around the lobby watching this happen. And so as a result of that, the accidental murderer has to now flee to a city of refuge like he should have the first time. And the intentional murderer, he got killed like he should be by the Basin. And God's always, working it out. Everything is justice across the board. But that's what God does. He sets it up that everybody can be plugged in. You determine the outcome of a moment, how God's going to plug you into his plate. But now it goes one step further. Because before, like Moshe, they built the Mishkan, or they finished all producing the Mishkan, but they didn't build it yet. They come to Moshe Benu. They say to Moshe Benu, "We can't build it. You do it." And Moshe says to God, "If 600,000 people can't do it, how can I do it?" God says, "You're right. You can't. You busy yourself with it, and I'll attribute it to you as if you built it. But I'm going to build it. I do everything anyhow." But the question is, who gets the credit? Who will I give the credit to? So Moshe, you'll get the credit for having built the Mishkan. So that's Magal Schus Adei Zakai. That's what that means. But now we're finding out it's even more than that. God says, not only will I plug you into my screenplay of history in a part that's mechupadik, that's honorable for you, and you get the merit for it, but it turns out that I will use your perception of reality to establish the reality of the moment that I want to have happen. Your schus is not only to do the good thing, but your schus is to create the opportunity itself, even bigger. That you become a much bigger partner with God in not just the fulfillment and fixing creation, but the building of creation. And maybe this actually answers a question, because in Parshas Balak at the end, the whole episode with Pinchas and the Benot Midyan and Zimri and Cosby and all that, Pinchas, there's one pasuk, such a powerful pasuk, that says, once all this chaos was taking place, V'yara Pinchas ben Elazar ben Aaron Cohen, right, because he was the grandson of Aaron Cohen, V'yikam b'toch Eda, right, and he got up amongst the assembly, V'yikach romach b'yado, and took his spear in his hand, and the rest we know. He went and he did the deed. The Gemara explains in more detail what actually happened. It wasn't just 1, 2, 3, but and God comes down later on, and everyone wants to kill him at first because they think, how can you kill a priest? A prince, right? So they want to kill him at first, and God says, no, he did the right thing. He was jealous on my behalf. So why Biyar? Why do we know that Pinchas saw? Of course he saw. That's why he got up and took the spear in his hand. Everybody saw. It wasn't like a thing happening at the outskirts of the camp. This is happening throughout the whole camp. Everyone saw what was going on. There was no one who didn't know what was going on. So, I mean, Pinchas. What do you mean he saw? Because that's what the Torah is telling you. That it's not just that he sees the opportunity. With his vision, with his perspective of reality, with his devotion to God, and his willingness to be Moser Nefesh, to sacrifice himself for truth, because that's who Pinchas was. He created the opportunity to be successful. The Gemara says 6 miracles happened for him. But he created that because that was one of the options, built in since Maaseh Bereshis. And because of his bitachon, because of his zealousness, he chose that. And by choosing it, he actualized it. And you can say the same thing about the Chashmonaim as well. Exact same thing. I heard 11 of them went out and fought a huge, massive army. Right now, the reality is that it's absolutely impossible. But there was the possibility. I mean, today it's even more so. One guy can walk into Washington, D.C. with a dirty bomb and cause the entire stock market and the world economy to fall apart because of the disaster. He could kill 9 million people just like that and cause phenomenal disaster around there with just one person. So today it's even easier for one person, a few people, to have such a major dramatic effect to bring a country to its knees, even big countries. So, but it was more than that. There was a possibility to lose the war. That's for sure. That was the most likely outcome. It's not that they said, let's go die. Let's go fight this battle and die in the process. And then God said, no, I'm going to save you anyhow. Oh, well, great, fantastic. We're so happy now. Let's make a holiday. Right? It's like, no, that wasn't the idea. They understood. It wasn't probable, but there was a possibility. Hidden away inside. And like the Jews by the sea, if we choose that, if we use bitachon, then it's like it's like these game shows. They have 5 doors, right? 4 doors, whatever, and you got to choose one of the 4 doors. And what you choose is, they're not giving any hints. They all look the same. It's your choice. You're going to choose door number 1, door number 2, or door number 3, or door number 4, and your choice is going to establish all those realities exist. There's already a holiday behind one door. There's already monies behind another door. There's already dog food behind another door. And there's already, it's all there already. You have to choose now which one. And this case has to come down to bitachon emunah. So here we're in a situation, in a war, right, against a horrible enemy that, like, literally, the Torah describes they don't care about the young. They don't care about life in general. I don't need to go into detail. They have revealed themselves. They have shown the world what they're like, how they think. Now, they may believe themselves 100% and think they're doing great things, but from a Torah standard, absolutely not. And the most probable outcome is that the hostages may not come back, or some might come back, and they've already been terribly affected already, and it doesn't look great. That's the most likely outcome, but that's not the only outcome. The ultimate outcome, if we learn anything from the Chashmonaim, is that we have to understand there's different possibilities. God can do anything. Cyrus, was the king of Persia. Who tells their people, the Jewish people at least, who tells them, go back and build your base of Mikdash? Achashverosh will tell Esther, you can have half the kingdom, but not the temple. Too powerful, too much. And Korah says, go ahead, go back and build it. You're asking for mutiny, rebellion? What are you looking for over here? He wouldn't have done it on his own. God put it into him. He told him to say it. He told him to do it. And for that reason, we get able to at least put the foundation of the Beis Hamikdash at that time. So God runs the world. Everything, don't be taken down by Asa's point of view, who's stuck in the physical world, who's completely given over to, nature. That's what the Greeks were. It was nature versus the supernatural. They didn't believe in bitachon emunah. That wasn't their thing. Their thing was either you're beautiful or you're not, strong or you're not, and that we're going to put you in a pedestal if you are, and if you're not, well, you can watch on the sidelines. But the Jewish people, right, they understood, no. We have a soul inside. We can live supernaturally. It's up to us to make sure we have the proper perception and have the proper level of bitachon, and we can actualize that reality and change the situation in ways that we should dream of, but maybe don't dream of. So, B'ezras Hashem, this Hannukah is coming to an end, and we should be zeicher to be makabel the Oregon News, a special light of creation that comes at this time of year, to allow us to be able to develop that das, that perspective, and understand things in such a much higher level, and give us more power to choose the better possibility and not the ones that take us down. Shabbat Shalom and Hannukah Sameach.
Thank you very much, Rabbi Winston. Your words are always very deep and meaningful and very strong, and we appreciate, and strong in a good way. We really appreciate your insights, as always. Please check out Rabbi's websites, 36.org and sharononproductions.org, as you can see. And this webinar was sponsored by the Miriam Project Geula Hour, and with me, Yehuda Shamroth, and with Josh Wander, who is serving in the Army right now. He hasn't been able to join us for several weeks. But please, thank you for joining our webinar. And also, Josh has another website that he might want all of you to know about called itstimetoleave.com. And I think you know what that means. We'll discuss that next time. And please, Hashem should bring the hostages home and let our soldiers be successful and end this war soon. And have Hannukah miracles for all of us in the whole world. Thank you, Rabbi. Good Chodesh Tov and good Shabbos to everyone as well. Thank you, Rabbi.